5 years ago, if you had asked me if I believed in anything supernatural without hesitation, I would have answered no. But this strange encounter I had on the night of May 2nd, 2013, it changed my view of everything. After getting laid off from my sales job of 8 years, I started driving Uber. I approached the gig as a way to keep money coming in until I found a real job. Boy, was I surprised when I began earning more driving strangers around than I ever did in sales. Most rides are routine. You pick the passenger up, you drop them off a few minutes later, no problem. But, of course, occasionally you do run into problems. After 6 months of driving, I had had my share of what I like to call crazy rides, drunk people, scammers, assholes, weird sexual propositions, and the list goes on. But, by far, the craziest ride I ever had happened on that cool May night. The first odd thing about the ride was the time and location of the pickup. I learned quick that it was best not to work past 1 a.m. because that's when all the psychos come out. On this particular night, at 12:45, I was about to call it quits, and when my app chimed. Normally, being so close to 1, I'd just reject the ride, go home. But the app said this ride paid $40. Now, there's no way I was going to turn down a ride that sweet. But as I approached the pickup location, I had second thoughts about accepting the late-night ride. It was an abandoned strip mall. All the stores were boarded up, and the parking lot was littered with trash. I couldn't help wondering, why would anyone want to be picked up here? I spotted a man and a woman standing in the lot waiting. They looked normal enough, nice clothes, clean. So instead of speeding away and canceling the ride, which I would normally do in a dicey situation, I pulled to a stop in front of them. As they slid in the back seat, I noticed 3 things immediately. The man was much older than the woman. He's in his 40s. She's in her late 20s. Also, the woman was smoking hot, like model level hot. And last, they were both angry at each other. Immediately, I could sense the tension between them. It was like they had just got a big fight and had decided to give each other the silent treatment. After confirming the ride, I began driving. Typically, I'd offer a bit of small talk to gauge the passenger's mood, but it was easy to tell from these two that chit-chat was not an option. Instead, they both stared silently out their respective windows, and the ride went on like that for about 20 minutes. And then for no reason that I could see, the woman broke the silence in the most unbelievable way. She turned to the man and said, "By the way, you suck in bed. Always the worst sex I've ever had. And your dick is fucking tiny." And I cringed in my seat, embarrassed for the man. I totally expected a shouting match to break out. To my surprise, instead of firing back, the man leveled a cold glare at the woman and simply said, "You fucked my brother." Then he turned back to the scenery outside his window. Now, you might be wondering, why would anyone behave like this in front of a total stranger? Good question, but I learned very quickly that passengers often treat Uber drivers like they're not there. They won't hesitate to have the most intimate conversations in my back seat. Some of the things I've heard are unbelievable. The woman's reaction to the man's accusation was a cruel smile. You wouldn't believe that someone so beautiful could suddenly look so sinister. Then she said to him, "That's right, I fucked your brother, because you and your little dick can't satisfy me. I don't think you've ever satisfied any woman. I hate you." And the man turned back to face the woman, but there wasn't a hint of anger at his face. Instead, he looked tired, done. The woman shook her head and sneered at him. Then she said, "You're pathetic." And with that, she turned and stared out the window. Now, instead of turning back to his window, the man turned to me and asked me the oddest question. He wanted to borrow a pen. I couldn't figure out what he'd want to write at that moment. Puzzled, I grabbed a pen from my center console and passed it back to him. For as long as I live, I will never forget what happened next. Without uttering a word or making a sound, he wheeled on the woman and began stabbing her with the pen. Hard, savage jabs all over her body, belly, face, arm, neck. The woman screamed, flailed, blood flew. Stab, stab, stab. I slammed on the brakes and I turned to intervene, but the attack was so vicious, so brutal, that I was mesmerized, frozen. Then the attack stopped. as abruptly as it began, and the woman, pockmarked, with oozing bloody wounds, slumped in her seat, dead. Spattered with blood, the man pivoted to me and held out the blood-soaked pen. Then he actually smiled at me and said, "Thank you." I scrambled out of my car and bolted down the dark road. I must have run 200 yards before I realized that I had forgotten my cell phone. There's no fucking way I was going back. I kept running until I reached an all-night gas station and called the police. A state trooper drove me back to my car. It was still there on the side of the road, motor idling. And the back seat was empty. No woman's body. No blood splattered. And craziest of all, no blood in the back seat of my car, not a drop. The trooper was not amused. He was convinced that either someone had pranked me or I was pranking him. Only after passing a sobriety test did the trooper agree to allow me to leave. He clearly didn't believe me, but I knew what I saw. There was no way it could have been a prank. It had to be something else. Did I have some sort of episode and imagine it all? And before I drove away, the trooper suggested I write down his contact information just in case I remembered more details later. I reached for the pen that I always keep in the center console, and it wasn't there. I quickly glanced around and confirmed it wasn't anywhere in the car. And then I remembered why. That was the same pen I gave that crazy guy. My pen was the murder weapon. The fact that it was gone was proof I wasn't losing my mind. I thought about telling the trooper, but chose not to push my luck. Instead, I just drove home and tried my best to forget all about that crazy night.